Hello and welcome to this presentation for Theme 3 of A-Level Business. This is the first video on critical path analysis. So you'll have heard the saying that time is money, and for businesses, often the more quickly they can complete a project, the less it will cost them. If they can complete a project quickly, their labour costs will be lower, costs of hiring equipment will be lower, perhaps even financing costs will be lower. And for these reasons, when completing large projects, it's important that businesses carefully plan all of the activities that need to be done to ensure the project is completed as quickly and efficiently as possible. Businesses use a project planning tool called critical path analysis, which makes use of network diagrams to carefully plan big projects such as construction projects like Crossrail, and also to plan important projects that they need to do, like launching a new product, for instance. So to illustrate the basic idea of critical path analysis, we'll look at a really simple project, making a cup of tea. So how do you make a cup of tea? Pause the video now and write down all the steps required to make a cup of tea in order and list their duration. How long does it take to do that task? Maybe in seconds or minutes. So you're probably looking at a list something like this. These are the tasks that you would need to do to make a cup of tea. First, you'd probably fill the kettle. Then you would boil it. Meanwhile, you might get a mug out, get the milk out, get the tea bag out, and so on. So while you're doing all these tasks, how long do you think you'll have to spend on making your cup of tea? So assuming that these timings are correct, just add up for me now how long you think it would take, assuming these timings are correct, to make a cup of tea. Well, according to my calculations, it should take about 195 seconds or 3 minutes 15 seconds to make a cup of tea. So why can you make the tea so quickly? If you added up all of these durations here, it would take much longer than 3 minutes and 15 seconds. Well, the reason is because you can complete several of the tasks while the kettle is boiling. These ones in the box, for instance, can be done while you're actually waiting for the water to boil in the kettle. And this idea, this is what critical path analysis is all about. Businesses use it to identify the order in which all of the activities need to be completed when you're planning a complex project, much more complex than this one. And this idea is represented on a network diagram or a critical path diagram. And these diagrams organize the activities to show which activities can be done simultaneously, like boiling the water while you get the mug out and get the milk out, and which activities are dependent on earlier activities. For instance, you can't boil the kettle until you've filled it. So that task is dependent on that task. And working these things out allows the business to identify the shortest possible time in which a project can be completed. And the critical path is the set of activities or tasks that will lengthen the duration of the project if they're delayed. For instance, if you forgot to switch the kettle on, it would mean it would take longer than this 3 minutes 15 seconds to actually make the cup of tea. So boiling the kettle is on the critical path. Okay, so what you need to be able to do following this video is you will need to be able to draw a network diagram for a given project. And we'll practice doing that in class. So before I show you a network diagram, can you please get a couple of key definitions down on the next slide? So what is critical path analysis, sometimes known as network analysis? Well, it is a technique that is used to identify the order in which all activities need to be completed when planning a complex project. This allows for the identification of the shortest time in which a project can be completed. And as I said before, the critical path is the set of activities that will lengthen the duration of the project if they are delayed. So please make sure you've got those down in your notes, and then we'll take a look at another example. Okay, so let's complete a critical path analysis and a network diagram for a new product launch. So that's our project. We're going to launch a new product. So what information do we actually need to carry out the analysis? Well, the first step in planning the project is to identify all the tasks or activities that need to be done. So here they are listed in this table, and they're labelled with letters just to make it easier to label up the network diagram, and you'll see that in a moment. And these are all the activities that will be done: conduct research, design product concept, design and test prototype, etc. So that's the first step. Then we need to identify how long each activity will take, and we call that the duration. And these are listed in months here in the table next to the appropriate activity. Third, we need to identify any dependencies. In this case, for example, activity C is dependent on the completion of activity B. You can't design and test the product prototype until the product concept has been designed. So activity C is dependent on activity B. So all the dependencies would also be worked out and listed in the table. So now that we've got all the information that we need, we can draw the network and work out how long this project will take. So first thing that we need to do when we're drawing a network diagram is to draw our first node. So nodes are drawn to show the start or finish an activity. So we always start our network diagram with a node, and they're always circular. And the number in the left hand of the node here is just to identify the node. It doesn't relate to how long the activity will take. And so since this is our first node in the diagram, we call it node 1, and we put a 1 in the left side of the node. Okay, so then what do we do next? Well, once we've drawn our first node, we can start to add activities to our network, and these are shown as arrows or lines. So nodes are shown as a circle, and arrows or lines represent tasks. Above the line that represents the task, we put the name of the task, and below the line we put the duration of that task. So our first task was task A, had to be done at the beginning. That was our starting activity, and it took 2 months. So that's our first activity. We then add another node to show that we have finished our activity and we are about to move on to another activity. So activity B is drawn after activity A, and that's because activity B is dependent on activity A, and we can see that from the table. Activity B begin when A is complete, so it must follow on from A in our diagram. The business can't start designing the product concept until the market research has been conducted. And this is also true of activity C. So activity C is dependent on activity B, so it must follow on from it. So tasks like these are dependent. But now we're going to take a look at some other types of tasks that can be done in parallel. So activity D and activity E, you'll see from the table here, can both begin when C is completed. That means they can be done in parallel. Okay, so they both come out of the same node that task C feeds into, and they both also feed into the same node, and I'll show you why in a second. So after activity D and E are completed, we can do activity F. Now activity F here, it says in the table, can only begin when D and E have been completed. So they both feed in to the node here before activity F. And then we add a node at the end because we always start and finish our diagrams with a node. And that's it. We've done our first network diagram. So what you needed to be able to do was draw a network diagram for a given project. Hopefully you understand the very basics about how to do that, how to represent the tasks on the diagram, where to show the name of the task, and where to show the task duration. And then we'll look at how you can use these in our next presentation. Thank you for listening.